Welcome back to Block TV for this special edition on a day when Bitcoin, the crypto markets as a whole, have all skyrocketed. With Bitcoin at the moment, at the time of filming, sitting up around 30%. It reached as high as $10,500 before cooling back down a little bit, now hovering around $9,500 at present. It's a pretty outrageous day, pretty spectacular, but beyond the number, the face value of it all, we need to break down what exactly is happening here and what might be causing and driving some of this underlying market movement. And so rather than do it ourselves, we have brought in the experts. We have our very own, we have with us Dovey Wan, founding partner of Primitive Ventures, here to break down an interesting element of this story. Firstly, Dovey, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, to start things off, one element that people are believing, and there's some narrative going around that has driven part of this market surge, is, of course, comments coming from Chinese President Xi Jinping in which he spoke about the need to seize the opportunity, the words he used translated there, seize the opportunity to adopt and use blockchain technology. This has been seen by many as a potential cause and catalyst for this massive market move. Dovey, can you break down a little bit about what Xi actually said and didn't say and the significance of what that means?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, the whole speech was actually conducted at one of this recent CCP core meeting. And so the core meeting is all about study blockchain. And the entire talk is everything about blockchain, and there's no single mention on Bitcoin or any other native cryptocurrency. So this is definitely something blockchain, but not Bitcoin. And so that's one thing we have to, understand. And then so what he mentioned, a few things I want to highlight here is he mentioned that one thing he so specifically emphasizes, all the other major nation states across the world are accelerating blockchain technology development, and we have to do so as well. And so I think whenever CCP, and especially for President Xi Jinping, when he talk about something at such a high level and such a massive impact, it's definitely not for no reason, right? And then so I think China on one hand feels the pressure of overall economic growth, and then on the other hand, it is actually ramping up its own digital currency, and then also wants to use that to regain or probably in the hope to gain financial overall the world economic leadership. And then he also mentioned that so we have to focus on blockchain standard research. Basically China wants to be the one who actually sets the standard. And then so he also said that and then so we want to just have further say on making this specific crypto or blockchain standard. And then so we have to gain the overall, we have to gain the overall global power over blockchain. And so that is his overall thing and just the narrative. And then so I think the narrative is quite competitive, I would say. And so it's all about China being the leader, and then China gaining power, things like that. And then just following on through, and I think a few things just alongside the talk, and then so he also mentioned that the blockchain technology has to merge with actual actual application, and then also try to solve things like lending risk and just lending risk, and as well as this credit risk per se. I think the other part of the talk is just very standard CCP propaganda, and then I think one last part of the talk is also worth mentioning is he actually mentioned about just legal enforcement on how to make blockchain player in mainland China relatively legit. And so he also mentioned about this potential security assurance, and we have to China has to further develop this security assurance, and then also regulatory body, and then so to make sure the local blockchain developer and then also like platform operators, and then so can be either like self-governance, so like probably can have like a better self-governance, and then like also have like a better industry standards like towards like compliance. And that is like pretty much like some of the highlights like from President Xi's talk.
So, but then as well, Dovey, it wasn't just the single talk. There were other ripple effects that spread out through, through China and through Chinese media that came along. You posted yourself about headlines from People's Daily.
People's Daily.
Exactly, as well as a blockchain app that has come out from the CCP. What can you tell us about these sort of wider ripple effects?
Yeah, so like I think that this talk is pretty much like 16 hours later, and so it was like first like broke by like 新闻联播. Like 新闻联播 is like the most official and then highly influential, just a news update every day, and it's like broadcasting on like pretty much all the channels, like all the TV channels like back in China. And then one thing I felt like pretty interesting is like actually during the Asian trading session, and like there's no major price movement reacting to it. So it's actually like after 4 or 5 hours, like when like the Western media, like CoinDesk and like etc., when like all the Western media broke it, and like we have seen this gigantic like price pump. And because the first news is actually out yesterday, 7 p.m. And then so right now it's actually 3 p.m. like China Standard Time, just like Beijing time. So it's actually like less than 24 hours. So basically in like last like 20 hours, and so like a few things happen. Like definitely local like Chinese that went crazy, but like even though like first like 3-4 hours like there's no like price movement, so I think like the price movement is like primarily driven by like Western trader, and then like once like the price pump for like the first like 16%, like from from 7,400 and then like all the way to over like 8,000, and like local Chinese like crypto player just like went completely crazy, and then like afterwards, and then so we have seen, so like early this morning China Beijing time, and we have seen the People's Daily have the entire headline just at the full page, like half of the full page, like half of the first page, actually talking about this like blockchain initiative, and just like presidency like promote it, and so like presidency encouraging us like to learn more about like blockchain. So that's what happened the first day in the morning China time. And then like right after that, and then we have seen like all sorts of stuff, right? And then so public company, so just like public traded company back in mainland China now seeing their own like blockchain initiative. And then like we have seen we have seen things like specific like blockchain course like from like top universities, and like just at the MOOC course, and so start to like circulate like on the internet. And then like we have seen this like blockchain application. So this blockchain application is actually not built by CCP, but it's actually built for CCP party member. And then so it's kind of, I don't know. So like from my perspective, and there's no good enough like product market fit, but like that's just like how you as a party member, and then so you always try to associate with, so you always try to relate yourself like to some patriotic and just like CCP specific like behavior. And so like what the application is doing is, it's like a journal thing. So it's more like a journal, like basically you can write down what you like about CCP, and then what is your intent, and then what is your original pure motivation like to join the party, and so it can actually log all of the thoughts like onto the blockchain. And so that is what the app is about. So it's actually launching by it is actually launching by the People's Daily as well. And so it's actually launching by the People's Daily, so not officially by CCP. So it's actually launching by the People's Daily. So I asked around like basically what is the specific blockchain that they are using, and nobody actually knows. And so I believe it must be some private chain. And so that is the app is about.
All right, and I want to take this question to the sort of wider geopolitical situation as well, because obviously we must give credit to the fact that this statements from Xi Jinping are coming in the wake of the big Mark Zuckerberg hearing at Congress last week on Libra, where there was repeated references to China, to having to combat various Chinese elements, including the digital renminbi. Do you think that this is a response to that? And if so, to what degree? And how do you sort of analyze that, Dovey?
Yeah, so like from my perspective, and I don't think this is a pure like coincidental like timing. And so it seems to me it's like semi intentional. And because like usually when it comes to such core CCP meeting, and usually we don't get very like prompt news update, and so it's always like a week after, like 2 weeks after, and then we will know like what's going on within the meeting. But I think this time it's pretty prompt. It's like 1 or 2 days after the meeting, and then so we know like, okay, blockchain is mentioned. So that's why I think it's not completely accidental. I'm not sure whether it's a direct response to the Zuckerberg hearing, but I think it's definitely related. And so like even though the whole thing is about blockchain, not Bitcoin, or like blockchain, not crypto, but I think the underlying narrative and like tone is. So personally, I think this is what like CCP is like trying to build up the narrative for like digital renminbi, and which gonna roll out by the end of this year, like potentially, and especially for like child. And so if we think about that, right, like digital renminbi is a completely new thing, and then also is like M0, and so it is like what the PBOC like wants to regain control of the entire China currency market, and then as well as just like economic power. And because right now the commercial bank has a lot of power over the central bank, and especially for the shadow banking business. So I think in order to build up the narrative and then also like establish the awareness, and so like CCP decided to use this like really good opportunity, and then also through the mouth of like presidency, and then which is the most influential way, and then just basically to like gain the mind share. And then I think is when it comes to just like the overall like financial, like, so I would consider this as part of this like Cold War like 2.0, and this is the financial game, right? So this is this is like a competition over like who can be the leader when it comes to like global currency. So like there's definitely relationship with that. And then I think like the other thing is, I remember the party member of CCP, like basically is like the head of this like spokesman of the CCP, or like the Department of the Diplomatic Relationship, just a few days ago. So they actually officially respond to Zuckerberg's comments on China threat, like things like that. And I think like probably it's not directly probably it's not directly towards like Zuckerberg's, probably it's not directly towards like Zuckerberg's hearing, but it's more about the overall global digital currency competition. And so I think it will be very interesting to see the entire like game theoretical play out. Of like whether like who will be the leader, and then so who is the supreme power over the next 20 years, over the next 20 years of like world economy as well as like global currency.
Yeah, certainly that's an interesting question I think we'd all like to know a little bit more about. But bringing this conversation back to Bitcoin specifically and this staggering price jump, because obviously that's what's gotten us here specifically today. Do you think that this is the cause for the price jump? Like looking at traders inside China, do you think they're responding to this by going out and buying Bitcoin? Because it was a blockchain, not Bitcoin sort of conversation, as you already pointed out. I mean, why does this then correlate with such a huge jump? And do you think there's an association?
So yeah, so like I mentioned before, because the news was broke like yesterday 7 p.m. like China Standard Time, and so we haven't seen any like major price movement like right after that news update. And because the news update was actually aired to over like 1 billion local Chinese, and so it's just weird that if like the price is like driven by local Chinese trader and like there's no any sign, right? And then when like the Western media broke it, and so like that's when we see the major pump, and so like that's why my hypothesis is like the entire so majority of like the price rally is actually driven by like Western trader, and like the Western trader, I personally think like the Western trader kind of like overreact, and because like 30% pump in like less than so in like 30% pump in less than 24 hours is probably the third largest like price gain like ever in the history, and like the last 2 times like these things happen, and like Bitcoin was like trading under $1. So if you think about the market capacity and volume and just like liquidity, and then so in order to pump Bitcoin for like 30%, like that's a like gigantic amount of money. And then just following along this like time series analysis, I think the Asian traders, so they definitely follow through, and so especially like after the first half of the 16% pump, so I have seen a lot more like leverages trades on like OKEX, and like that is like where most of these like Asian traders are like trading on like Huobi, and then so like the volume there just like gone up, and yeah, so like first of all, even so, and just if we think about like the whole if we think about the whole like talk from C, right? So even though it is blockchain but like not Bitcoin, but I think like blockchain is naturally, so it's very naturally, so if you so if I'm someone completely new to crypto, so if I'm a local Chinese, right? And so when I see this like mention and like promotion like on like people's daily, and I would just like go to Baidu and like search blockchain, and then whenever they do the search blockchain, and then so there will be like auto just like pop up, and this like related like search query result as like Bitcoin. So I think whenever you are like promoting blockchain, and then so by nature is like a very relevant point to like Bitcoin. So you basically cannot divide and isolate Bitcoin from blockchain as like a concept, because I think they're just like one entity, and then just like one atomic entity. And so when you like talk about blockchain, especially for like especially for like who's new to the whole crypto industry, and like and so especially for who's new to the crypto industry, and like blockchain to some extent is pretty much like equates to the awareness of like Bitcoin. So it's like a very natural path, and so like the cognitive load gonna be very small for you to learn about Bitcoin from learning blockchain. And so I think like the other thing about it is once we have this like green light and just like blessing from President Xi, and then all this local Chinese business, and then so it can be like crypto business, it can be like exchanges, like it can be blockchain as a service, like enterprise company, etc. And so I think they will be getting this type of like blessing indirectly. And so enterprise blockchain company gonna get the direct blessing, but like platform like all this and then all the crypto media, and then all the crypto exchanges, and I think they will also get blessing to a certain extent, and so that will actually drive up the momentum, and then also like the morale of the whole industry, and then also for like local, so for like local Chinese citizen, and it is also another very big like mind share, and then just educational experience, and because I think most of like probably like 80% Chinese out there, and then so they have like heard about Bitcoin, but they have no idea about what actually it is. And then so we have seen like the Baidu search query like just pump up as well for both like blockchain and Bitcoin. And then like also even like searching query for the exchange is also popping up. And so I think that's a very interesting like firsthand data that I can share. So it's definitely the entire sentiment and like morale is up, and people are like talking about it, and then like all the news are writing about like blockchain. And then so when you like write about blockchain, and so you want to like educate people about the history, and then so you have to talk about Bitcoin. So like you can't divide these two separately.
Yeah, certainly, it is a complex web to break down, but Dovey, you've done your absolute best. I want to thank you so much for giving us that incredible insight and analysis on what's happened over this wild last 24 hours. Dovey Wan, I want to thank you so much for coming and joining us at BLOCKTV, and please stay with us at blocktv.com for all the latest in news and information. I'm Asher Westrop Evans. Thanks for watching.